Welcome to Behind the Byline, a podcast by PR Newswire, where we chat with journalists and editors across APAC on what goes behind their bylines. We'll find out more about a day in their work life, trends, and developments they are looking for, and how PR professionals can work better with them. I'm Kate, Audience Development Manager at PR Newswire. Today, my guest is Luisa Tam, Senior Editor of South China Morning Post. Based in Hong Kong, Luisa has been a journalist for more than 30 years and covered journal news. More recently, she is known for hosting SCMP Learning Cantonese video series. Besides working at SCMP, she has held a variety of roles during her career. These include working as a producer for NDR German TV, a media campaigner with Greenpeace, and the deputy managing editor of Eastern Express. So welcome, Luisa, to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Kate. Yes, I'm a senior editor at the South China Morning Post. In fact, I've worked for the Post for quite a number of years. I think back in the 80s, I worked for the Post for the first time. I think I must be the only person that I can be very sure to say that I think I'm the only person that's been going in and out of the Post for like 7 times, at least more than a dozen times. So imagine it back in the 80s, and then it's 97. All those, I've seen many very news milestones in my career. Anyway, I personally went into journalism out of my curiosity to do something different. Originally, I want to be a nurse, and then I also want to be a lawyer, and then a dentist, and then a policewoman. So I thought of all these options, and then I think one very good advice came from one of my godfathers. I had quite a couple of godfathers, and then he said to me, he said, "Luisa, you can't be a nurse because you're quite impatient, and you move really fast, you talk really fast, and you want results very fast. Being a nurse and in the healthcare profession, you have to have patience, and you don't have that. But you do have some kind of like personality that's really a good fit for being a journalist." My godfather was a senior journalist with the Standard, the Hong Kong Standard. So he introduced me to the job, and I just started as a cadet, and I really liked it. And then I stayed, and then from a junior reporter, I worked my way up, and I've been in this business, actually it's quite close to being 40 years, believe it or not. At one point, I think 5 years into my career, I did want to do something different. I did try to get into the police force, but for some reason they rejected me. Anyway, it's a good thing, because at that point people told me that if you don't change your profession after 5 years, you will stick with it for the rest of your life. And it's true. After those 5 years, I decided to stay. And then here I am, almost 40 years in the business. And every day is still like a new day to me. Being a journalist, the good thing about it, you get to live a different life every time. Because when you talk to somebody, when you're really into their story, you seem to be living their life, in your way of experiencing their life. So I think that's the attraction of being a journalist. If you really love it, you really dive, into it and live a story, writing it. Especially now, I'm writing a lot of feature stories. Feature stories are like at the softer side, the behind the news kind of stories. And then when you live a different life all the time, every day is a different day. You don't know what you're going to encounter. It's a bit like a police officer, right? Every day if you're in a metropolitan city like Hong Kong, your everyday life is different. You come across different stories, different cases, right? So I think in a way, I didn't make it to the police force, when I tried it after 5 years of my career, years ago, decades ago. I think now I'm living my dream. I love my job. And I think this is the only job I've had, a profession, I guess. And I really recommend, if you don't, people say it doesn't pay well. If you work hard, it does pay. Not it's going to be like, very expensive lifestyle, but it pays a really relatively good life. And I do love being a journalist. I think anybody who is curious about the world and people and things around you, why not try journalism? Encourage your kids, if you are still, interested, you can still, change career. But I think this is the job, for people who has a curious mind.
Wow, I never know that you have so many dreams. Even I know you for a long time.
Yeah.
But journalists do suit you, I think.
Yeah, I
so
think so, because I'm a very curious person, and a bit like a PR profession too. I mean, in PR, you have to be curious about your client. If you're not curious about your client, you basically do a job, and your client basically depends on you to sell, to promote what their products or their belief, their mission. And then some people, they have a business that's actually their mission. It's not just, especially nowadays, a lot of health products. It's behind the health products, the founder, has a mission to help somebody. So that's why when you being a journalist and being a good PR professional, you really have to be from the point of view of your client, to understand the product. Yeah, like you understand our story, and you present it, you write it the way that you sell it, the way that you want people to hear you. So you make sure that the products are prominently highlighted. So in a way, we do have some similarities between a journalist and also a professional PR.
Right. Okay, so go back to very first question. So can you share with us more about your media outlet, South China Morning Post, and what's so unique about the news coverage?
About my the company I work for, and then we usually, I work for this and that newspaper. We don't say newspaper anymore, because even though we do a print copy of it, but we just say a news organization, because a lot of media outlets, in order to survive in this day and age, they have to be like multimedia, i.e. that not you can be consumed through the hard copy of a newspaper. You also will be most of the time consumed by using a phone, through a mobile phone. So it's important that we are multimedia, and not just doing news stories. We also have to do videos, present video stories, short stories, sometimes interview in the newsroom. We don't just have a newspaper interview, written out in a story and publish it online. We also have the studio story. So we get the guests to come in. It's basically like a multimedia in the sense that you just not read the news, you hear the news and watch the news. So it's a news organization. So because I worked for the Post in the 80s, in the late 80s for the first time when I was quite young. And at that time, it was the best newspaper, the top English language newspaper in Hong Kong, even though there was the Standard, the Hong Kong Standard, which I also worked for quite a number of years. It is the top leading English language and also a leading newspaper, local newspaper, because it was such a privilege at that point to work for the South China Morning Post, because when you work for the English language, first of all, you get paid better. I don't think it's maybe it's still the case in a way, but I think a lot of news organizations in Hong Kong locally, local based, are paying better as well. But the old days, we pay like, I think maybe twice, if not 3 times as much as the local paper. So the transformation at that point, like it was the premium newspaper, not just in English language, but in general in Hong Kong. Now it's become an international platform, a news platform. With, as I said, this multimedia, we have the print version and we have the online version, SCMP.com. We have the video, and our print version, I think the circulation is, I really have no idea, maybe 50,000-60,000. And then, but the online version, when you read the news, consume it on your mobile phone, your smartphone, the number of readers, let me try to think now, 25 to 30 million. That's just a lot. You talk about, we're not, of course, not obviously not in Hong Kong, but everything is being consumed on the phone, so it's international. So we're international news platform. So it's 25 to 30 million readership, and also with videos, because we produce a lot of in-house videos, either kind of like semi-short version, documentary, docu-news stories. It's about 500 million, between 300 to 500 million. So you can see the transformation from the 80s when I was there for the first time to now, 40 years later. It's from a local English language premium newspaper to become a very high-profile, prominent English language news organization, where we do stories not just for the local audience, but mostly for overseas audience. So you like a transformation from a local girl, like if you want to look at it from a point of view like a person, if you want to describe a parallel likelihood of a person, if from a little village girl we transform to a metropolitan, a girl working in New York or in London or in Shanghai, Beijing, So we have become totally a global entity, news entity. You mentioned the South China Morning Post 30 years ago. I think people in Hong Kong definitely know you. In Asia, yes. In Canada, yes. In London, maybe. In America, maybe in New York, because we had in the 90s, we started doing the international SCMP version, going to Canada, New York, and London, maybe. But now you mentioned the South China Morning Post. I was once in a very remote village, I think, not so much village, a small town in France, in north of France. And then when somebody introduced me as a journalist, and then the other person say, who did you work for? And then I said, South China Morning Post. And they said, oh yes, we saw that, we know it. He said, is it owned by Mr. Jack Ma? So it is become something like people, when they think of Hong Kong news organization, they will think of the South China Morning Post, because that is, we provide a window. People can actually read about China in English through reading the Post platform.
I'm sure people who target Hong Kong media, they must know South China Morning Post. So the next one is about, I want to know that the regular web day is like for you.
It's so different now. I mean, we still do because now I'm a senior editor. Besides writing my columns, I also look after a number of teams in China. They're based in China. They cover Chinese local on-the-ground human interest stories, and they're very viral. The reason we have this section, this it's called People and Culture. It's a new entity, new-ish, because we came to being. I took over this section and revamped it. From November 2020, where are we now? 2022. Yes, this is years past. It was November 2020. That's right, almost a year and a half, not 2 years, a year and a half ago. So I took over I created People and Culture, and took over a number of people from the China team, and then took them out of the China team and then put it into my section. And with a very small team, 6 people. But we cover stories on the ground. For example, when you read newspaper, you have a lot of hard news stories. Even like with the Shanghai COVID lockdown, you have people, about the COVID situation and the number of cases, the caseload, and what have you. But you also want to relate to those stories, understand how people are surviving in the lockdown. So we did a lot of fringe stories, the human interest fringe stories. So stories that, will tell the life behind the scenes, behind the COVID lockdown in Shanghai. So in that way, we attract people not coming to read only the hard stories, because you can only have so much of COVID stories. We've lived with COVID for more than 2 years now. So you want to continue to put the story out, the COVID themed story out. You need to attract people to give some human interest, human flavor to this theme of COVID. So I cover stories like that. I cover stories about one-child policy, but then during the one-child policy, before the 3-child policy in China, people were really secretly having kids, and one family had 9 kids. So when you uncover a story like that, you're not just writing about a story about the 9, family with 9 kids, about the reflection of how desperate people were trying to, in China, they preferential treatment for kids, boys, they want to have sons. So when they try to get the son, they keep having kids that have girls and then girls and then son. After they have one boy, they want more boys and then keep having. That's why they build up to such a big family, 9 kids. So in that way, we cover a story about a family having 9 kids, not only story about the family itself, but also reflect the policy in China, the population and the national policy in China. So that's why we cover a lot of these human interest stories that are really doing quite well. In a way, we draw readers to our platform, then they read the story, and then they will continue to stay on to read other stories that our platform provides. So that is my job, to provide a lot of interesting human interest stories from China, about China. The same thing, the concept is the same thing with PR professional. Let's going back to your profession. When you want to sell something, the product, you need to draw people in. You need to find a soundbite, some news angle that the readers or your client, the target audience will be the public, but then you want to reach the public through the media. So you need to draw the attention of the media personnel to sell a story. So same thing, our client are the readers. We want to draw their attention to come to our website. So we have to find the right angle that they find relatable. So that's what I'm doing. I'm doing a lot of viral stories. Give you an example. Some of the stories is one story. A couple of stories in 2020, we drew more than 1 million people. One story in Shanghai, we got 1.7 million. Another story about 1.4 million. That's how it works, with a lot of human interest stories that really work quite well when they touch on certain really essential topics about China, very hard topics. But when you have people, personality involved, the story becomes really relatable and very readable.
Yeah, you mentioned about the COVID. So the pandemic has dominated news cycle. Yeah, it definitely. So how have you been adapting your news coverage to the developing situation in Hong Kong?
In Hong Kong, a little bit, but in Hong Kong, my teams are all in China, but in Hong Kong, I also write columns.
Yes.
I mean, COVID has dominated the news cycle like for on and off for 2 years already around the world. Again, as I said earlier, it's about finding human interest because people are very tired of COVID, but they need to know. They need to know the caseloads, the situation, how contagious it is, what's the latest with the variant. Is Omicron still the most transmissible variant? What else are there? They need to know, but you need also have to feed them something more human. So we have to find human interest stories about COVID. Like for example, in Hong Kong, I don't really touch upon the Hong Kong COVID situation. In Hong Kong, I only cover. I write columns that are about Hong Kong, but I guess with COVID, you still, like I said, with my China approach, doing viral stories in China, is to make sure that every story does have a human touch. So you need to go dig behind the scenes, looking for certain human interest stories to present the latest COVID situation in Hong Kong.
Okay, right. So may you also share with us the recent and new editorial initiative over the past year?
Initiatives, because I'm not really that much involved in that. The past year you talk about 2021. I guess as you said earlier, the COVID, I did it's still dominating the news cycle. But we have been, I think, we still on the new. We basically in the direction to provide more. It's kind of like readers friendly sort of items. For example, we call it service journalism. That means our stories also need to service the public, i.e. that we provide stories or information that the public need. For example, during COVID, where is the best place to get some fresh air? I'm just thinking out loud. In COVID situation, where's the best place to get the best deal in staycation? During COVID, where's the best place to find a good health instructor or coach, something that is daily lifestyle related during COVID time. And it's so much, not so much like hard journalism, it's called service journalism. We provide a service to readers a bit. So that's why I think that is the place that where you guys come in as a PR professional. If you have clients that are in the service providing in the service industry, provide certain service, I think this is actually quite a good time to approach certain lifestyle journalists that may be looking for some soft stories to brighten up, to brighten up the COVID cycle, because every day is COVID. People don't want to. They're really living, in COVID times and living with COVID. They want something kind of non-COVID related, but also kind of, related. You know what I mean? Because of COVID, you need to do something certainly differently. So, what is the latest health products from your client you can sell? What is the latest COVID preventive lifestyle or products? That kind of thing. You will have to think in relation to COVID, but kind of pull people away from COVID at the same time. If you see what I mean?
Yeah. And actually, Luisa, you have been a journalist for more than 30 years. So I really want to know that what has been the most memorable assignment or interview that you have done in your career, and why does make it so memorable?
Memorable. I mean, have had very many memorable moments, but some of them not so much like interview, but there was one case a long time ago, I think it was in the 90s. I was sent to Sydney, to Australia, to interview a singer, a very famous singer called Mick Hucknall. And I remember going to Sydney. I can't remember what hotel it was. I was taken there in the car. So I saw his band, and then Mick Hucknall. If you check him out, he was very big in the 80s, even in the 90s. I think now he's in his 60s, early 60s, I think. But then he was a big star. He was doing a world tour, and then was Australia, and then I think Asia and Hong Kong. Hong Kong at that time was still a very popular place for concert, but now it's just not so now, because I guess pick a bigger, can play China and other parts of the world. But remember, before they came to Hong Kong, they wanted to, to drum up some publicity. So they said, why don't you go? And I said, I haven't done a soft story before. So I said, why don't I go do an interview a big singer? So I went to Sydney. I remember it was so at that time, when you do research about certain, he was very famous of being very political. He likes to talk about, the Thatcher, Margaret Thatcher's administration. He's very, very critical, very outspoken politics, in terms of politics. So I had to find out more about him. But, in those days, there was no internet. It's not so easy about you research somebody. You just, go to, Google and then just type the name and you can research their political views and their lifestyle, the latest scandal. You don't, and it's so difficult to find background. I knew about him, but all I could read was the files, the clippings. So it's very difficult. So I managed to get some, background, and I think we had a long chat. I think it was like 2 hours. I can't remember. I was quite also what was very interesting was that that was the first time, and there's just some anecdote here. It was the first time I went to a hotel room, and there was a bathtub in the middle of the living room. Now that was the interior design. I never saw that before. It was a very advanced. So we talked a little bit, and then that was my overseas kind of like different. I made overseas trips before, but not so much like a feature, a soft profile story about a mega rock star. So that was one. Another experience I had was quite interesting. It wasn't so much like an interview, but an encounter with the last governor, Chris Patten. I think it was 1992, 93, because I was heavily pregnant. So it must be 93, beginning of 93, because my daughter was born on June 93. So it must be maybe, I think, April or June. I was quite heavily pregnant. So Chris Patten gave me the prize. And then he started talking to me and said, oh, when is the baby due? So I told him about June. I think it was June 10th. I told him because my baby was born June 5th. So I said, I think the big day was June 10th. And he gave me some advice. He gave me the prize. And then he started talking to me, hey, you're going to make sure that your husband will get into the labor room, and you make sure he will stand there and be with you. And my girls were born with me, also in the room with the mother. So you got to do this. And then, have you got a name? I said, yes, I got the name for my daughter, Mivanwe. Oh, and then he said, oh, it's a Welsh name. Because a lot of people, they know when you say Mivanwe, it's a very Welsh name. So, oh, it's a daughter, it's a Welsh name. Your husband is Welsh. So we had a chat, I think, like a couple of minutes. Imagine a couple of minutes on stage when you're supposed to just grab the prize and go. Would have lasted like a few seconds. But we lasted like, I think 2 or 3 minutes, a long time. So that was my encounter with Chris Patten. And I saw him a few more times in parties, cocktails, and official meetings. He was a very lovely chap, and a lot more interesting story. Some stories about me, like I was in my cocktail dress one day, and then I realized I had to go to cover a fire story. I think it was in Diamond Hill. I was in my high heels because I was planning to go out that evening, and then suddenly this huge fire broke out in Diamond Hills. I had to go there. So a lot of things that as a journalist, you can never really plan your evening. It's not a good job when you're dating, because when you have a plan, you have a cocktail party to go to, you have something to do in the evening, you can never make it. You can never know what's going to happen. So I think that some of the experiences I could share with you.
Wow, nice. I'm sure you enjoy to be a journalist very much. So many memories.
Imagine being in a job for so long. Of course, I've done everything, except, I think sports. I think I've never done sports stories before, horse racing, but I've done every single thing a newspaper could offer. So I couldn't complain. It's given me, and it's still offering me many life experiences that other jobs possibly wouldn't be able to give me.
Great. So we go to another second part. It's about the tips and insights for PR pros. When it comes to receiving pitches from PR professionals, what do you look out that gets your attention?
I think when you do pitches, and you got to think, as a PR professional, as I said, we do have some similarities. You got to sell the story as a PR, you have to sell the story to the media to enable to get the public to notice your brand or your products, your whatever services you're providing. As like a journalist too, we have to draw the attention of the readers. So you need to think like a journalist, i.e. you have to have words that draw the attention. If it's COVID, I know at the moment you put COVID in a lot of things, but people are so tired of the word COVID. Maybe you have to think of some other things to draw the attention. I don't know what products are you going to sell, but you need to relate to something that people will pay attention to. Maybe you live longer, healthier, become, something that will draw the attention and give them a little bright spot in life. So you need to think not in that, not to follow the news cycle to the extent that you basically become part of the 1,000 items, very similar items out there people are trying to sell. So you need to come up with catchphrases that you think. Sometimes, for example, you sometimes can go to Google and search the catchphrases, the top phrases the words people search on Google. You find out what are the most important things people look for. I think at the moment people look for healthy life, happiness, anti-stress. Those are the words people look for. So you find out what the words people are searching for, then you go. You go for those catchphrases, and you put in your subject line when you send an email press release out. Make sure that you have those words in your subject line, basically in your headline, to make sure you catch their attention. Find the catchphrases, the most searched words people are looking for these days.
So, then what type of content would you would like to receive from PR professionals that would be useful in your writing?
The same, rule is you make sure, not just me, you make sure, as I said earlier, you follow the news cycle. Okay, the news cycle at the moment is COVID, but then you work around it. You don't want to send out a COVID-19 story. People, if you're not from the authorities, from a top medical professional, from the governments, people probably won't read it. But you need to tell people how you kind of work against the backdrop of COVID. For example, your client has products about health, then you make sure that what's the best part of this health product. You're going to show it in your in the story, in your press release. So it's not about what I'm looking for, is what you want people to look at your subject, your press release, because you have something valuable to send, to tell. So making sure your press release is full of information, interesting information, first release data, first time release survey, unusual facts. You need to pack those things into your press release, into the first 3 paragraphs, and also make sure it's highlighted in your headline. So that, I think that would be people want to look for, even though it's not related to COVID, not the news cycle. There's something that your story can give people a new, some new insights, that is important. So information, insights are the most important.
Yeah, okay. So coming to the last question, what upcoming trends, topics, or event in 2022 that you would be keen to report on?
I think 2022, with 2022, we 1 quarter into it. I think everything to do with the world reopening, because we are hopefully at the end of COVID after 2 years. So by the middle of this year, it'll be 2.5 years living in COVID, everything under the influence of COVID. I think anything that is post-COVID, how to sort of get back to the life that we used to know. I think like myself, I've been looking at how to rebuild the confidence to go back to work, because after I think I told a few people, I think I even told you, after being working in an environment, in a bubble, working from home, most people have experienced it. You kind of have this FOGO, the fear of going out. And I think I will want to read a lot about this, how to rebuild a confidence to be able to mingle, to interact with people again, to overcome the fear, to be able to be healthier. I think is important, because a lot of people put on some weight because of COVID. But I think people are lazy. If you have some products or something that help people to kind of overcome the laziness, but able to be healthy and lose some weight and continue to sustain a very healthy lifestyle, that would be the trend. So I think that anything would do to do it post-COVID that involves people, how people want to live 2022 in a way that they can remember the good years before COVID. I think, I don't know whether you understand me. So basically returning to normalcy, to continue a new life post-COVID, but also remembering what we had and trying to go back to that and being better than before as well. You know what I mean? Better than pre-COVID, and also overcome COVID, and then living a life is a bit different. So I think a lot of lifestyle things, lifestyle topics will be top of the chart. I think people would like to know about lifestyle, travel, but travel differently as well. People are more health conscious at the moment. So a lot of health conscious products and lifestyle that kind of related. I think that will be the trend. And people are also more, besides more health conscious, also more peace, more at peace with the world. So I think in the environment will be quite big as well.
Thank you today for your sharing, Luisa. We do hope that we can overcome the COVID very soon. And that was Luisa, Senior Editor of South China Morning Post on the Behind the Byline podcast. Follow PR Newswire on Spotify and YouTube to receive the latest podcast every month. We will see you next time.